Hi everyone, and welcome to this Tuesday night special. We usually, you see us here on Thursdays, but this is a Tuesday, and it's because it's a special night. We're here to dig deep into the soils of Washington State over in the US, and we're going to taste 5 different wines from 4 different grape varieties from Ste Michelle Wine Estates. My name is Andreas Grube, and my special guest today, I'm very honored and pleased to introduce to you Mr. Sander Vriend from Ste Michelle Wine Estates. You're the Managing Director for Europe, Middle East and Africa, is that right?
Yes, absolutely, Andreas.
Yeah.
That's
welcome.
What I do. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. Thanks for giving me the honors to do some vinotainment with you and your wine lovers.
Yeah, thanks a lot. But you're actually based you're from Holland and based in Germany, is that right?
Yeah, I'm Dutch. I was sentenced to Germany. I had to pay 5 years prison or 10 years Germany, and I went to Germany.
Yeah.
I wanted to stay here 6 months, and that was in October 1994, and I never moved. So the 6 months became a little bit longer.
Nice. As I said, we're gonna focus on Washington State today. It's gonna be a sort of a masterclass in Washington State. But Chateau Ste Michelle Wine Estates, you actually produce wine in several other different regions, right?
Yeah, that is correct. We actually call ourselves a string of pearls. The string is the company, and the pearls are our children. Each of a winery, our kids have different DNA, and actually we believe we are the proud pioneers of viticulture on the West Coast, because in California, Ms. Wine Cellars is one of our children, which was the winner of the Judgment of Paris. It triggered the wine industry in California. In the state of Oregon, we have Erad Winery, where Mr. Erad and Knudsen were one of the first 4 wineries, and actually brought Pinot Noir to Oregon. And in Washington State, with Chateau Ste Michelle, we are the founding winery in Washington. So it was Chateau Ste Michelle who started the industry in the state of Washington.
It's super interesting. And also, before we continue, I just also again going to tell you that if you want to ask questions to Sander and me, you can just write them down right where you are right now in the comment in the field. And we soon get into the tasting. But it's interesting with Washington State, because what people might not know is that it's actually the 2nd biggest wine region in the US, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that I believe Washington is the last to be discovered premium wine region on earth. When people think about viticulture in the United States, they tend to think about California only, and some Pinot Noir lovers, they are aware that Oregon State is there, and then it kind of ends. But actually, Washington State is the 2nd largest region. It's a lot smaller than California, but it is extremely interesting because it is completely different to either California or Oregon because of its location and because of its climate.
And to give you a little bit a hint of a picture of Washington State, we're just going to show a 90-second video and then move on to talk about, get into more into Washington State. So here's a short introduction to where we are.
It's 1967 in an inconspicuous vineyard in eastern Washington. A small winery is crafting its first vinifera, or European-style wine, under the label Ste Michelle Vineyards. This vintage was the quiet beginning of what would become the thriving, sophisticated wine industry of the Pacific Northwest. Few knew when Chateau Ste Michelle began cultivating European-style grapes in the Columbia Valley that Washington would eventually become the nation's 2nd largest producer of premium wine. But quantity is only part of the story. Quality is the main character. Washington wines have received international acclaim, and the state now stands shoulder to shoulder with the world's great wine-producing regions. Chateau Ste Michelle has been named Wine and Spirit Magazine's Winery of the Year numerous times and has received 18 Top 100 Wines designations from Wine Spectator. All this has attracted the attention of some of the world's most distinguished vintners. The Antinori family from Italy, Ernst Losen from Germany, and Michel Gassier and Philippe Camby from France have all come to Washington to partner with Chateau Ste Michelle and create some truly remarkable wines. The pioneering vision that gave birth to an industry is still going strong. Here's to great wines and incredible wine experiences for years to come. Cheers.
Wow, that makes you want to travel even more, at least for me. Wow, I want to go to Washington State at some point, very, very soon. And we're soon going to start tasting the first wine. But Sander, can you just give us a little brief introduction to what makes Washington State special when it comes to, I mean, climate, the temperature, rainfall, sun hours, and just what makes it special? What makes the wine taste the way they do?
I think that's a perfect question because, like I mentioned earlier, we are not California and it's not Oregon. So quickly, we're going to fly from Arlanda, the airport in Stockholm. We saw each other last week there. We're going to fly to Seattle, and after 10 hours, we're going to be in a bad mood because we sit somewhere in the back. First class is full, business is full. We sit in row 33, and are we smart? We order a gin and tonic, and if we're very smart, we order 2 at a time because the trolley is always slow. So
smart thing to do.
We come to the directly south of the Canadian border on the west coast. So it is not to mix up with Washington D.C., the capital. It's on the other side, directly south of the Canadian border, which is actually still the same latitude as Bordeaux. But the state of Washington, which is also called the Evergreen State, is split up in 2. So actually, if you take the western part, it is the wet part. It's the evergreen part of the state. The nickname of Washington is the evergreen part of the state, where we have the Pacific Ocean, which is very cold. The water is about 8 degrees, so similar to Stockholm. It's cold.
Yeah, for sure.
And right there on the west side of Seattle, you have a rainforest with up to 7,000 millimeters of annual rainforest, which nobody ever thinks about. Then you have the city of Seattle that always has a threatening little bit of rain. In the early morning it rains, and in the late afternoon it rains, but 3 months in summer it doesn't. On the east side of Seattle, we have the mountains that go up to 4,500 meters, and that is a huge rain barrier. It's a rain shield. And on the other side of the mountains, of the Cascade Mountains, when you've passed Mount Rainier, you come into a desert. There is no more rainfall. There is 300 cloudless days. Summers are hot, winters are cold. In summer, the morning is cold and the afternoon is hot. So complete metamorphosis when you go from the rainy part where Boeing and Microsoft and all those places are, Starbucks, to the east side of Washington, where you have hardly any population, where you hardly see any trees. You are truly in a viticultural El Dorado because there is no phylloxera. It's cold in winter, it's warm in summer, but cold at night. So you really get a stylistic of wine that is different than California.
Yeah, very diverse, I guess. Yeah.
Andreas, you know the difference between, the cold climate regions and the warm climate regions, right?
Yeah.
Washington is somewhere in between. And if you have those cold climates, or go to Champagne or Chablis or Rheingau in Germany, the wines are light. They are low in alcohol. They are high in acidity. They tend to be white and light on its feet, aromatic. And on the other side, the wines from a hot climate, let's take Barossa, they tend to be red. They tend to be big in body. They tend to be high in alcohol, low in acidity, and they always tend to be somewhat oak treated because it just matches that. Washington has the perfect hybrid of the two. So the white wines are somewhere cold climate with a little bit more body, and the red wines are somewhat warm climate with a little bit more freshness.
Which is super fun because the first wine we're going to taste is actually a Riesling that you normally maybe you think about Germany and Austria and all that, but it's also this is the Chateau Ste Michelle Riesling from 2019, and I mean, this is a perfect example of what you're talking about. You have the white wines, the crisp and fresh, but also with some sunny fruit on it. And but I mean, how big is Riesling in Washington State?
You're going to be surprised. Riesling is actually significant in Washington. If you take the mix between red and white, it is about 55-45. 55 is red, 45% is white. And you can kind of split those up between half and half Chardonnay and Riesling. And the rest is a little bit, there is some Pinot Gris, some Sauvignon Blanc. So Chardonnay is actually significant. And to be honest, I'm going to believe a secret. I don't like talking numbers, etc. But the Riesling that people will taste right now is the most consumed Riesling on earth.
Wow,
and
for real?
That's
I
shocking,
didn't know.
Right?
Yeah, it is actually.
Can you
but
imagine?
it's a fun fact. I would totally have guessed it was something from out of Germany at least. But
Here you go. If I tell that to somebody at a German winery and said the most consumed, and I mentioned the most consumed because a lot of people truly like it. And I think the reason why people like this Riesling because it has all the elements of Riesling, but it is not that acidic. It's not tight.
No, because that was what I wanted to ask. Because now I already started sniffing and tasting it. But I mean, how could you tell that this is a Washington State Riesling? If I get this blind, well, I mean, what do you get in it? If you can explain sort of the palate. Yeah.
I like that question because I like telling that. If you take Riesling is an aromatic varietal, right? It's bright, it's well perfumed, it's always very light on its feet, it's aromatic. And if you ask Annie Lozen, Dr. Lozen, the three most important things about Riesling, he will say acidity, and you get it, acidity.
Acidity, yeah.
If you take Washington or if you take Riesling, the typical fruit that you always get from Riesling is stone fruit like apricot and peach. Like when you bite in a ripe peach, when you're in the south of France, it always drips a little bit around your chin. You want to have those stone fruits. And then depending where you go on the world, you get an individual characteristics. And for me, the typical Washington aromatic for Riesling is always a little bit of zestiness, that orange zest, that mandarin zest. When you peel an orange or a mandarin, that spritziness that you get.
I also get some amounts of lime, both freshly squeezed and some lime peel, lime zest as well. It's really sort of a zing in it.
Yes, and I think the reason why so many people truly like it, because it is not bone dry and it is not sticky sweet. It has a beautiful fruitiness. It has that I want another zip style.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's hard to put it down. Yeah, it's the best thing about wine when you just want to pick it up again. That's the thing with wine.
I'm a wine snob. I like my fancy things. I truly do. But whenever I open a bottle of the Chateau Ste Michelle Riesling, all of a sudden the bottle is empty because it's gone, because it has that yummy factor.
Yeah, yummy factor is a good word.
That's probably the secret of our Riesling. But to go back to make a typical Washington in your MW exam, in your blind tasting, you find a little bit of that zestiness and that lime characteristic that you mentioned.
Yeah.
No reduction. It's not sweet. It's not sticky. It doesn't bite you anywhere. And
sorry, continue.
I'm sure you're going to ask the question: what food would go well?
Yes, that was what my intention right now. Oh, I would just I would drink it on its own. You don't need to serve anything. But if I would, I mean, this is I would like to drink this to like asparagus or like a toast Skagen. You know, it just would be the perfect match with some lemon on top. A toast Skagen. Wow, good.
I think you have a whole lot of different foods that go well because the wine has nice acidity. It has no oak. It's not creamy. So it'll go well with Asian type of food, with light spiciness, a little bit of heat. When you your Thai food goes well. You take your sushi box with sashimi, a little bit of ginger, wasabi, perfect match. You take some cream cheeses. You take the Skagen toast that you mentioned. Now for the decadent people and the non-sustainable, you take some sustainable goose liver. It would actually go well with that. So many things. Oysters.
Well. Of course.
Oysters.
Definitely. I'd rather have this than, I mean, this would be perfect with some oysters. Should we continue to the next wine, Sander, which is of course the Ste Michelle Chardonnay, and this is 2018. And this is maybe what people in general maybe associate with the sort of the West Coast U.S. And you mentioned earlier that this is a significant grape in but I mean, and again, if you say the same with this one, I mean, how would you describe a typical, or how would you tell that this wine is typical Chardonnay? From what defines the style?
What I explained in the beginning, when you talk about the terroir, that you have those Washington climate. You have, if I take a typical midsummer day in Eastern Washington, in the desert, you walk the dog, you get up early, and the sun is there. You know it's a perfect blue sky, but it's fresh. You're going to put on your shorts, but you're going to put on a little jacket because it's about 10 degrees Celsius. And in a later afternoon, your day temperature will go up to 40 degrees Celsius. So It's hot. Humidity is very low. So in the morning cold, in the afternoon it's hot. At the end of the season, when we get to harvest season, the daily temperatures are equally cold as what you find in the Rheingau or in the Mosel, not 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. And that preserves acidity in the grapes. And that acidity is a key factor to what defines the wines from Washington. And with Chardonnay, if you take a typical cliche style of New World Chardonnay, well, let's go to California. You always have those tropical fruit, you have a buttery stylistic, you have some creaminess, and you get some, the cliche confirms a rich, let's say, smoky oak characteristic.
Yeah.
In Washington, you don't get that. You get fresh fruits because of the cool climate effect that we do have in our area. And what I want to say with that, you tend to get fresh fruits like apple and pear. And because we put those apple and pear flavors, you do get a little bit of the creaminess because we do 42% of this wine has aged in a combination of French and American oak barriques, the 225 liters that everybody's aware of. And the more often you do the batonnage, the stirring up of the wines during its aging, the creamier it gets. We only do this every other week. That is very, very few times. That is not very often. So only 42% gets malolactic.
So it's sort of a hands-off. Yeah. Okay.
Hands-off approach. Keep your freshness. With a wine like this, we want to achieve typical Chardonnay characteristic, typical Washington characteristic with a signature of Chateau Ste Michelle.
What would you say would be the sort of the perfect serving temperature for a Chardonnay like this? How would you? What temperature would you serve it?
I like that question because sometimes I hear that, well, your Chardonnay is a little bit bitter, and I'm like, no, you should be angry with the refrigerator, not with your glass or with the wine, because the wine has been a little bit on oak. There is a little bit oak tannin in the wine, and if tannins get cold, they get bitter. So the Riesling that you served in a perfect glass, a lovely Riesling glass, light and fragrant, something like I got over here. I would serve my Riesling at about 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. Serve it a little colder, it'll warm up. And my Chardonnay, I would serve at about 10 degrees Celsius in a pretty much the same glass as you have.
Sort of a Chardonnay glass is at least is what I have here.
Yeah.
I agree. 10, or I mean, it wouldn't mind if it even 11 or something around that. I mean, it's just I also love the sort of the mouth feel of this wine, because it's sort of a cream, and it's just a little bit of fatness or whatever you call it. The nice mouth feel makes it very food friendly as well. Which, and speaking about food, what would you serve? What would you pair for this wine?
Because of the creaminess that Chardonnay, as of a specific price point, has, I think once you cross the 100 krona, all Chardonnays will have specific oak treatments, a little bit more, a little bit less, and some batonnage. That means to get some of that creaminess, they need a tiny little bit of cream in their dish. At night, it likes proteins. If I love some seafood with a little bit of butter. If I go to the market in Seattle, I get some king crab legs. I make sure I put them in the oven for 10 minutes so they're nice and warm. And I put some melted butter with some sage or something like that. I make sure to lock the door from the inside to switch off the doorbell. And I make a big glass, and you put on the music that you love, and you indulge. So foods like that.
You're making me hungry. Yeah, you're making me hungry.
I think stuff like that. Don't serve it too cold, because then you're going to be angry with your wine because you think it's going to be bitter. Use the glass. If you don't have a glass like this, take your decoration where you put the swim candles in. Use that. Take it outside. Give it a little bit of air before you drink it. Like open it. I like to actually put it in a decanter for 20 minutes before I drink it. It gets a little bit of air. It opens up. It gives its creaminess a little bit of a chance to develop, and then you're good.
We have a question here. I'm gonna take my start with my first red wine glass. We have a question here from Lisa, who asks, "How are the temperatures in the spring in Washington State?"
Thank you for that question, Lisa. It depends on the year. If you go to, and it depends whether you go to Seattle or whether you go to Eastern Washington. If you're in Eastern Washington and you're there in spring, March, April, the day temperatures might be around 10 degrees Celsius, cold. I've had early morning frost in early May. So that could happen. It might as well be, depending on the year, that you get 15 degrees, but it will never become a lot warmer. So winter stays a little bit longer. Then spring is rather short, and then summer is long. And then all of a sudden it stops. At Halloween, you get a hard stop, because after Halloween, which is the 30th of October, 31st, you might get frost. So,
okay, it depends.
Thanks for that. Did I answer the question?
It did, for sure. Are you ready for the first red wine, Sander?
I am.
You talked about this smelling game. You think we should do this with this one or the next one?
Yeah, no.
At least I'll introduce the wine at first. It's called the Pundit Syrah, and it's 2016. And it's actually, if I'm correctly informed, it's around 88% Syrah and then also some Grenache, Mourvèdre, and Viognier, right?
Absolutely. I think.
But before we get into the smelling game, because as people just obviously notice, this bottle looks a little bit different than the others.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah. Also, the name is different. Well.
Yeah.
Us as a company, we have 3 partnerships. A partnership with Marchese Antinori from Tuscany, where we have a winery called Col Solare, where we focus on making the best possible Cabernet Sauvignon in Washington, or Cabernet Blend. We have a partnership with Dr. Lozen from the Mosel, where we make Eroica Riesling, like the 3rd Symphony of Beethoven, the 1st Symphony of Chateau Ste Michelle. That really helped the Riesling that we just tasted to drive. And we have a partnership with the rock stars of Châteauneuf-du-Pape and the Rhône Valley, Michel Gachet and Philippe Camby, who also discovered the fantastic climate and El Dorado of Washington for viticulture. So they approached us because they wanted to make Syrah together with us. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to make a fresher style of Syrah. You've noticed yourself that in the new world, wine become bigger and richer and more concentrated. And what happens is you lose the identity of a grape varietal. So a big, fat, rich Syrah doesn't taste like Syrah anymore. It tastes like a big, fat, red wine. And you wanted, so what we decided here, we wanted to make something refreshing again. So we changed a few things in the vineyard. We changed a few things in winemaking to make it a livelier, a more adorable wine with a little bit more tension, but a lighter body. And the owl on the label is the expert. It's often seen as the expert overlooking what's happening in the forest. And
the name.
The pundit means actually the expert. And so this is the observer of the experts that are changing the dynamics of Syrah in Washington.
Okay, cool.
I can repeat that.
but it would be a fun thing to do your tasting or smelling game for this wine, maybe just to take us all through the nose and just get us to understand it if you the game.
All right, I got to explain it in a quick way. With that smelling game, I like to show the multiple components of the flavor profile of this wine. Because what we do, we always pour a glass and then we swirl and we smell and we swirl and we smell and we swirl and we smell. Well, not really a whole lot is going to change. You can swirl 1,000 times and you can keep on doing that, but you will not keep a whole lot of different things. But I want to take you through, as well as the audience, through the multiple layers of complexity of this wine. So the different noses, the first nose, the second nose, and the third nose. They show different complexities. And in order to do that, you take your glass and you blow in it. And then you put it down. Here you go. What you just did, you got rid of all the wine flavors. And the time that I'm talking now, the glass fills up with the first nose. This is the liveliest, the most charming, the lightest. And in order to smell that, you just stick your nose in the glass, but do not swirl. No swirling. Perfect. No excellent. What I get, a
lot of sort of herbs and stuff here.
Yeah, I get a little bit of black licorice. You get a little bit of violets. You get some maybe
some cinnamon powder.
Spice. Yeah, absolutely. Spice. Now, if you want to get the second nose, you swirl your glass 3 times, not 5 times, or 3. 1, 2, 3. That's it. And you smell again. It's brighter. You get richer fruit. You get more the blueberries. You get the white pepper a little bit. You get a little bit of the braised meats, a little bacon on the side.
Yeah.
And now we go for holy moly rock and roll. Wiener Walzer.
Go. Yeah.
And you smell again.
Wow, here's some darker fruits and all. Some chocolate and that kind of notes for at least for
more
me.
More intense, right? You get
more intense, more
yeah. You get it brighter, you get it livelier, and now if you
also a lot of violets and stuff like that.
Yes,
beautiful.
So if you now take a little zip and keep it in your mouth, I mean, I need to talk so I can do, but keep it in your mouth for 10 to 15 seconds. You're going to notice that you're going to go through different stages in your mouth as well, the stuff that you smelled. It started off with that sappy, juicy fruit, red, blue, and black fruit. You get the licorice spiciness. You get a little bit of the white pepper, but it's all fresh. You know, it has a little heart. It has a soul. It goes pa-boom, pa-boom, pa-boom.
Very nice, very fun experiment. Super fun, and it says a lot. You get all the components in the wine as well.
Be careful because it's trademarked. You can use it, but you got to pay.
I'm gonna send your bank account.
You can use it.
Afterwards, so we'll all send you money.
I grant you the pleasure.
And again, back to food, like a wine like this, because as you said, I mean, it is very bright and very beautiful, but still you have some. It's also well structured. You have some spiciness in it, but it's very. I mean, I feel you can serve. There's a lot of things to go with this one. You can go. I mean, from like entrecote or something like that to a chicken or even root vegetables. You can do. It's very diverse wine.
One of my favorite things with it is braised cheeks of beef, which is more a winter dish with the mashed potato and some roasted veggies. But you're right, it goes with barbecue foods, it goes with a pizza, it goes with a steak, it goes with lovely braised meats. It goes as itself, and even with mushrooms and all that.
Very nice wine, and when it comes to serving temperature, I mean, we use the sort of the new world Syrah glass, and serving temperature. For me, works really well. I mean, like 16, 17, somewhere around that, because you get a little bit cooler, because then that also enhances the freshness in it. For me,
it warms up by itself. I think was something that you're referring to, and it's I think it's a very valid and important point for everybody who likes to drink a glass of wine. Most white wines are consumed too cold, and I think most red wines are consumed too warm. I put this in my refrigerator 20-30 minutes before I drink it. I mean, I take it from the cellar, so it has a nice temperature. I'll probably open it at 14 degrees, and by the time you pour it, it is 16 degrees, and then you'll enjoy it, and then you're all fine.
Yeah, then you're all fine.
What I've done a couple times with some of my wine friends or friends at home that enjoy a glass of wine is take one and the same wine, and I take a small glass, a regular glass, and a big glass, and I take that times 2, and I serve the same wine cold and warm, to see the difference, to see what functions well, which glass actually works well, which temperature works well. And I think that is a very nice exercise where people are going to discover that the glass as well as the temperature makes sense. Because it
really does.
What happens here, if it becomes a little bit too warm, you're going to taste the alcohol. And you might want to feel the alcohol a little bit, but not taste it.
No, exactly. And I think it works really well because it also enhances the sort of freshness. We're going to round up with 2 different Cabernet Sauvignons. And the first one is the Chateau Ste Michelle Cabernet Sauvignon from 2017. And this is also around 88% Cab, and then also some Syrah and Merlot. And again, I mean, Cabernet Sauvignon from Washington State. How can you tell that this is what it is? I mean, what will you get in the wine? What that tells you in a blind tasting that this is actually Washington State?
When you're not sure if it's old world or new world, where am I going to put it? I get back to the initial story, the freshness that you get. Because of our climate, we have that hybrid between warm and cold climate. At the end of the season, when the daily temperatures are low, you get physiological ripeness, hence the Cabernet grapes start tasting like Cabernet. They still develop a little bit sugar, but when it's cold, they stop developing sugars. That means they preserve acidity. So you preserve the freshness in your berries and therefore in your wine. So a warm climate wine tends to have a big body. This is a medium plus body. It's rich, but it is not big. It has some elements of oak, but it's not oaky. And it has definitely, and that is probably the quintessential part, fresh fruits. If you take a sip in your mouth, you have fresh fruits. No marmalade or cooked fruit. You have the fresher fruits. I always get some cherries. You always get some lovely velvety tannins. You get a tiny little bit of a kiss of oak. But definitely the freshness that you get from this Cabernet puts it for me in Washington.
Well, that's super cool. And these are grapes that are sourced from different sub-regions within Washington states. Why? And I mean, why? How come?
If you take Washington State, it's 24,000 hectares of viticulture, which is a little bit smaller than the Champagne. It's between Champagne and Alsace, so it's a small region. And the 24,000 hectares are spread out over a surface from 200 times 200 kilometers. So there's a vineyard here, there's a vineyard there, there's a vineyard there, there's a vineyard there, completely spread out. And so we have a lot of different microclimates. That means if we go to the Walook Slope, Cabernet is more New World. We go to Walla Walla, the Cabernet is a little bit spicier. We go to Yakima Valley, Cabernet is racier because it's cooler. So what we want to do with this Columbia Valley Cabernet is we want to represent a typical Washington style Cabernet. Again, with the signature of Chateau Ste Michelle, but we want to make this typical Washington. We want to represent that freshness. I think when we get to the next wine in a tiny little bit, you're going to see the difference between a typical Washington and a more appellation-oriented wine like the Indian Wells, which comes from just one specific area that has a specific terroir and therefore a specific flavor profile.
I mean, I also have a comment here from Sophia. It says, "Wow." For the pundit we left, Sophia said, "Wow, could I keep this wine for some years? How does it develop?"
How this will develop, Sophia? That's a good question. Drink your wine when you like them. Well, you can age your wine as long as you want. Some people like the wines young and fresh. Some people like the wines mature. I think that these wines are meant for early fruity consumption. Give them a year. First year they're a little bit brighter. So if you take the Pundit, for example, it's delicious now, and it will remain in a very similar style for the next 3 to 4 years. Yeah. What will change? You will lose a tiny little bit of the fruit richness. The spiciness will become a little richer. The tannins will mellow down a little bit, so you will lose a little bit of that juiciness over the years. If you like your wines very spicy, keep it for 10 years. Then you're going to get a lot of pepper, you're going to get meat, and you're going to get dried fruits and stuff like that. So it'll easily age for 10 more years. But right now it is in its fruit stage, and in a later time it'll slowly go down to the spicy part. So that's how you decide how you like it yourself.
How you like it yourself. Yeah. Back to the Cabernet Sauvignon, I can tell you that it's been aged on oak for 14 months, if I'm correctly informed. But what I want to ask you is, I mean, what would you say is the sort of the perfect occasion? I mean, when do you pick a bottle of this out of the cellar, and how do you serve it?
We did a last at home last year. We all had a lot of time. Unfortunately, being at home, I travel normally a lot. So last year I was all of a sudden not 180 days per year in a hotel room somewhere in Stockholm or you name it. So I've been spending a lot of time on my deck. And what we did is we made the patio outside a little prettier. And when my neighbors came by, this would be a typical wine that I would open. Funny enough, they always come around dinner time. Can you imagine? Funny.
I wonder why.
And the barbecue might have been on, and might have done some veggies and things, and a bottle of white wine was there. So they probably figured out there is a nice time. This would be the wine that I would open for daily consumption. I would open it when my friends come around. When I have multiple friends here, and some of them are my wine snob friends that like the posh things, but some others are just average friends. I mean, average friends that are average wine consumers. They don't really care about the terroir, the oak, the this, the that. Because my wine snob friends would say this is extremely well made, and I like it. And my non-wine friends would say, "Oh, this is great. Give me another glass."
That's the perfect thing to match both kinds of friends.
And it doesn't make you poor.
No, exactly. And we have, as we said, another Cabernet Sauvignon as well, and this is called Indian Wells Cabernet Sauvignon. It's the same year. It's also 2017. So what would be the main differences between these two cabs?
What we want to achieve on a different quality levels, we call it different tiers. The other Cabernet, we call it Columbia Valley because it's a reflection of the entire valley, the entire region. Indian Wells is one vineyard in one place called the Walook Slope that has a little bit less diurnal shift. That the day and night temperature difference is not as big, and so for me, this becomes a little bit richer. So actually, I tend to explain it in a simple way by saying this is the most Californian style wine made in Washington. It has a little bit more body, it has a little bit more spice. Because of the richness of the fruit, the ripeness of the fruit, which is a little more intense, the wine gets a tiny little bit more oak. So you get a little bit more oak sweetness, some muscat, you get some maybe a little coconut, you get a little bit of smoke to it. That really suits that Cabernet style that you get from that location. So we wanna refer to this as a little bit more of a New World style, where the Columbia Valley is a little bit more of a typical Washington Old New World style. So that would be the difference.
Super interesting to compare them, because I mean, also since it's the same year, it's the same vintage, so it gives a really good view on these differences. But the funny thing is, I would say that I would have guessed in a blind tasting that the Indian Wells was slightly older than the Columbia, than the other one. For some reason, it just gets hints of sort of leather and coffee and stuff like that would suggest maybe that it's. But it is. So I guess it's just the vineyard itself and the microclimate in that area that makes a difference, which is also interesting.
Your point is excellent, because if you go back to what I mentioned earlier, because this is a little bit warmer, the acidity is a tiny little bit lower. And that always gives the impression that the wine is a little bit riper, and riper wine always gives people the impression that it's a little bit older than it is. That's just imagine in 15 years time when you and I think we're going to do some Botox because we think we need it. This wine did not need it yet. Something else that is probably attractive to understand for our audience, for the viewers, it is 90% Cabernet and 10% Syrah.
Yeah.
10% makes a difference. 1 or 2% makes a difference. Sometimes when there's 2% and people ask me, why do you put it in? I say the funny thing is because we topped up the barrel, but the smart thing is it really makes a difference. Yeah. Cabernet Sauvignon tends to be a donut by itself. The flavor profile, the roll with the hole in the middle. That hole in the middle would kind of be that mid palate that's sometimes a little shallow, a little thin. Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Merlot, and Malbec have a very intense mid palate. Yeah. So a little bit of that Syrah that is also flavorful, extremely flavorful in Washington, adds some additional flavors, and it adds a little bit mid palate to the wine. So it is for body and for flavor purposes.
How long? I mean, if we're talking aging, how long would you keep? I mean, it serves super well right now, but I mean, how long could you keep it if you like your wines really really well aged? Would you say?
I actually like if you like your wines well aged. This is easily gonna take 10 years. I like to drink this a little bit younger because that's where it truly shows its origin, its DNA. It's a little bit richer. It has gone to the gym a little bit more often. It has more muscle, it's a fuller body, and I think that in this scenario, It just goes well. This would be my perfect steak wine. If I put a chunk of meat on the grill outside on the barbecue, this is probably close by, because it cost me 1/3 of what I would pay for a similar Cabernet quality from Napa. And the neighbors are still coming. I told you about them. Believe me, they do come.
And you don't need anything else. You just need a chunk of meat and a bottle of this, and then your dinner is served.
A chunk of meat and a bottle of red. Meat and red. Here you go.
There you go. We have a question here from Madeline. I think you mentioned it, but she's asking, is it less acidity in the Indian Wells compared to the Columbia Valley?
Yes, Madeline, it is. It's acidity. You talk less than a 0.5 gram difference, but a 0.5 gram difference makes the wine a little bit fuller, a little bit richer. 5 points.
5 points. Thank you. Good, Madeline. You know what, Sander? We've done 45 minutes, and we're at the end of the tasting. We'll have one last question for you before we round up, and it's from Leah, who's asking: is it possible to visit your winery? I mean, apart from this pandemic going on, but usually,
absolutely,
when this is over,
we do have the chateau that you actually see on the label is near Seattle. It's not in the vineyards; it's near Seattle. That's where we make our white wines. It's one of the most visited places in Seattle. If you take the Space Needle and the Seahawks Stadium away, yes, it is, and we love it. In summertime, we have our concert series where there is fantastic artists. Last concert I visited was Bob Dylan, the Gypsy Kings, you name it, Paul Simon, and a whole bunch of those fabulous artists come each summer. Not last year, and we're not sure yet about this year, but yes, we welcome visitors. If you want to come visit, if any of you comes to Seattle for a cruise or for business or for a vacation, please make sure to contact the distributor, the Vinkopen, and ask for that. We will arrange you. We will welcome you with open arms.
Sounds lovely. I'd love to come. I'd love to go. Thank you, everyone that's been watching. It's been a pleasure, and thanks for the questions and the comments. We'll answer those questions we hadn't time to answer now. We'll do online afterwards. Thanks a lot to you, Sander. It was a pleasure having you with us here tonight, and thanks for all the information and the inspiration. It was fantastic, truly. And you can read more about Chateau Ste Michelle on the website stemichelle.com, right?
Saint-Michelle.com. ste-michelle.com.
Yes, exactly. And of course, you can check out winetable.se to see what's going on there, read all the articles and the things that we're tasting from Systembolaget and all. And please check back on Thursday in 2 days, because then we're going to taste thirst-quenching wines for the summer with Per Strömberg and Maja Bertas. Again, thanks a lot, Sander. It was a pleasure. And to you all at home, thanks a lot. And cheers. Have a good evening.
Cheers. Thank you. I hope everybody has become Chateau Ste Michelle ambassador. Cheers. Andreas, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.